Welcome, everyone, to what I hope is going to be a really great episode. At your request, I have gotten in touch with the illustrious Dr. E. Michael Jones, who is here with us today. So, Dr. Jones, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on here. It's really an honor to speak with you. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
The honor's all mine, Michael.
So there's a few things I wanted to ask you about. I don't know how much Dave told you about my background or if you watched any of my videos or anything, but I grew up Jewish in a very left-wing, secular, atheist Jewish community that we call Reformed Judaism in the United States. Almost all of them are atheists, believing in all the usual left-wing stuff. And so my journey to understanding what was going on didn't even start till I became Christian at the age of 28.
Okay, where did you grow up?
One of the suburbs of Chicago, actually, a very Jewish suburb of Chicago.
Skokie?
No, but my grandma lived in Skokie, nearby Skokie.
Okay.
In one of the areas that back in the day Jews were actually not even allowed to live in that area. And then once it all started making sense and receiving the Holy Spirit and reading the scriptures and seeing how my life changed, that's kind of how I came across your stuff. Was I watched a video of you talking about your book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. And it struck me because it was so accurate, not just in terms of what I experienced in my own soul growing up, but also what the people that I grew up with in my community, like how they act and how they believe. It really just put it all in perspective. So I'm really glad that someone took the time to put all this information together. And so the first thing I wanted to talk with you about was that I have had nothing but failure converting other Jews to Christianity. And I've tried, arguing with them, trying to persuade them from the scriptures, all kinds of things, and I've had absolutely no luck. So I wanted to ask you, what if you know of any successful efforts to convert Jews from the past, like what's been tried, what worked, and what didn't, and if you had any insight into that.
Yeah, well, don't feel bad. St. Paul didn't do very well either trying to convert the Jews. He ended up being expelled from the synagogue, and then all of the synagogues in Asia Minor ended up going to Greece and basically preaching the gospel to the Greeks. If you read The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, there's part of that talks about Rabbi Nicholas Donin going to Pope Gregory IX and asking the Pope if he knew what was in the Talmud. And the Pope said, "What's the Talmud?" He had never heard of this book before. And then Rabbi Donin gave him an earful, and he became more and more horrified as time, and the more he told him, the more horrified the Pope became. So at this point, he turned to St. Raymond of Peñaforte, and who was head of the Dominicans at that time, and said, "I want you to confiscate these books of the Jews and put them on trial. And if you find that what Rabbi Donin said is true, then you should burn them all." And then he said, "I want you to dedicate the efforts of your order, the order of preachers and the Franciscans, to the conversion of the Jews." Then this St. Raymond of Peñaforte went to St. Thomas Aquinas, who then wrote the Summa Contra Gentiles to convert the Jews and the Moors. And Raimondo Martini wrote a book called Adversus Judaeus et Mauros. Actually, it's called Pugeo Fide, the dagger of faith aimed at Jews and Moors. And what followed was the most successful conversion campaign in history. It basically, over the course of the next 2 centuries, the Jews in Western Europe either converted to Christianity or they moved to Poland. So that by the time it was over, there were virtually no Jews left in Western Europe. And the Vatican was having problems. What do we do with all these synagogues now? What are we going to do with them? Turn them into churches? Now, the problem here was that the conversion campaign was in many ways too successful, especially in Spain. And there were lots of people who converted simply because everyone else was converted, and they held on to the old forms of Judaism. And they were known as conversos. And they not only did they hold on to the old, the rituals, they held on to the Jewish revolutionary spirit as well. And as a result, they were collaborating with the Moors at the same time that Philip and Isabella. Ferdinand and Isabella were trying to drive the Moors out of Spain. So eventually they called in the Inquisition. They couldn't figure it out. They just threw up their hands because the rabbis at this point had told the Jews that you could be insincere. You know, you could say you were going through the motions of conversion and not be sincere in doing it. And so you created this huge problem. This is the beginning of racism in Western Europe because people started talking about, the Spaniards started talking about limpieza de sangre, the purity of blood. Before that time, the Jew, if he converted, if the water of baptism rolled across his head and the mob was chasing him, he got baptized, then he walked through the mob because there was no racial consciousness at that time. The Jew was basically a rejecter of Christ. If he rejected the rejection, then he was one of us, and that's the end of the story. I wish it had been the end of the story, but the converso crisis caused one of the murkiest and unhappiest incidents in the history of the church. But in terms of how can you transpose that to your friends or your family? It's not easy to understand that. But I think that the main way you do this is by talking about what's going on in the world and how it affects these people. Because people want to know, and I find that we've been subjected to these retreats. They come to the local parish, and the people just start talking in some type of vacuum. You have to address the situation. You have to address the situation that people are in. And so what I'm realizing now is it's not the Jews in particular, but there are large numbers of 20-year-olds who have grown up with pornography and have a horrendous pornography addiction and masturbation habit. And I was able to address them. I didn't know about this, but I wrote a book called Libido Dominandi, which the subtitle is Sexual Liberation and Political Control. And all I had to do was say that, and suddenly they understood what was going on in their lives in a way that they didn't before, simply because I addressed the situation. I took the whole issue of sexual liberation and took it seriously. And this was one of the crucial elements in their lives that was troubling them. And because I took it seriously, because I addressed the situation, many of them went on like a strike, a pornography strike in November, and realized that they had to do this because they were slaves of their passions. So I think if you're talking about the same type of thing with the Jews, you got to talk to the Jew. You got to talk to them honestly about the current situation. That's the best I can offer at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I got a couple of questions about the dagger of faith. And I've tried to argue with my Jewish friends from the scriptures. It doesn't work. And one of my family members last year was talking about the rise in anti-Semitism. And I was trying to point out that the people that are getting upset, it's not like the human beings of the Jews that they're upset at. It's the behavior that they're seeing that's hurting the culture and the people. And I even showed this member of my family that video. I don't know if you've seen it, of Barbara Spector.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I tried to show this video to this member of my family, and there's this scales on the eyes phenomenon where it's just this reflexive rejection of that truth. And I think that's what your revolutionary spirit thing is about. When you don't have that logos, it's like it's the rejection of the truth is the rejection of Christ, because Christ is the truth. And it's been so difficult. The best effect I've had so far is just kind of sharing my testimony of how my life's been different after Christ came into my life. But that really only works with people who knew what I was like before, when I was the revolutionary spirit. But back to this dagger of faith thing, first of all, is that still available? And is it based on rhetorical persuasion, or what was the actual method that they were using that was so successful in Spain, I think you said?
I don't know. In many ways, they had disputations. The Christians controlled the culture, and no Christian in good conscience can force conversion. If they do, they're not good Christians. But they would make the Jews go to disputations, and the rabbis would show up, and the Christians would show up, the scholars, and they debate topics, and they bring up things in the Talmud. and say, well, is it true that Jesus, in your book, that Jesus is up to his neck in boiling excrement? And one of the rabbis said, well, no, that's another Jesus. And someone said, this was the beginning of Jewish humor. The simple fact of the matter was, this was called the Disputation of Tortosa, and the Jews couldn't answer the objections. They had basically an obsolete religion. They had a Talmud that was based on basically endless disputation with no resolution in sight, and they were simply defeated in argument. It was that simple. And people were the Jews were demoralized because they felt that they had I think they all agreed it was an obsolete religion. All of these prohibitions that didn't make any sense to anybody, all of these laws that had just been, multiplying opinion after opinion on insignificant things. And the heart of the whole thing was empty because they didn't have a temple. So how are you supposed to fulfill your covenant? You don't have a temple, you don't have a priesthood, you don't have a sacrifice. So what do you have? Well, endless disputation. And this was proved, it basically carried the day in Spain and throughout Europe. They were convinced that they couldn't answer the objections that the Christians were raising, and so they converted. Maybe grudgingly, I don't know. I don't know enough about the psychology of what's going on at that time. But I mean, the whole reason that I started this book on Logos, I'm finished it now. We're just finalizing the corrections. Was because I was traveling all around the world and engaged in all sorts of conversations with all sorts of different people, which is now possible largely through the internet. So I had, real interesting conversations. Like an Iranian woman, for months we would talk back and forth. Well, how do you talk to these people? How do you talk to, going to Iran, these people, it's a completely different culture. A world that, I was never exposed to. How do you talk to these people? Well, Logos is the answer. And if you get into these discussions, often I have gotten in discussions with Jews, on the internet. Sometimes it's more successful than others. Sometimes you're dealing with people who are simply not intellectually honest. I won't mention any names, but there are people out there who are just trying to trip you up so that they can get that moment on camera and then show that and then get money from their backers because they tripped up, E. Michael Jones. I try to avoid people like that. If I have the sense that that's the issue, I don't really want to talk to you. I have more important things to do. But if you're interested in the truth and if you're interested in Logos, I'm happy to talk to you because that's the essence of what we are as human beings. We're rational creatures.
Well, I watched your interview. I forgot the guy's name. He was like a big name rabbi of the Kabbalah. I think it was last year or within the last year.
Was that Lightman, Rabbi Lightman?
Yeah, I think that was his name.
Yeah.
And so the Talmud is a big part of it, but most of the Jews that I know are obsessed with Kabbalah. And before I became Christian, and even part of it, while I was still a Protestant, there was some overlap. I was a Freemason. I was an officer in 4 different groups. I was invited into the secret groups where they're not public, that you don't find out about them unless they tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you have the right kind of brain for this, come check this out. And there was a group where you have to say that you're a Trinitarian Christian to join, which I was at the time. I was a Protestant, but I was on my way towards Orthodoxy, which is where I am now. And I got into the group, and I thought I was going to be surrounded by Christians, and I was so relieved to have found a Christian group of Masons because I'd already kind of started asking questions about the philosophy that was going around there. And all of these guys were alchemists and Kabbalists.
Right.
And I was talking to one of them, I said, do you guys even believe in Christ? And he said, yeah, like the Christ consciousness. And I said, you guys aren't even Christian. And so when I used to be a Mason, I obsessively studied the writings of Albert Pike. I read through all of Morals and Dogma. It's like more than 900 pages. It's all based on Kabbalistic philosophy and the Zohar. And I saw, it was really in your interview with Mr. Lightman or Dr. Lightman that I actually heard someone trying to argue it for the first time. And it was such nonsense. And he was so deceived. I could see that he was even fooled by it. Because occultism, to me, it's like a chew toy for people who are really intelligent, where they're smart enough to be fooled by things that sound really fancy but don't actually make sense.
Yeah.
And the Kabbalah is so not Jewish. It's not like the whole backstory of Albert Pike called it the traditional Hebrew philosophy, and it's absolutely not. It's something they learned, I think, in Babylon. It was the Babylonian mystery religion that they kind of they painted Jewish words over it. And it's Neoplatonism, essentially.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's the Hermetic text meeting Jewish Talmudists. And they came up with this mishmash that is still around. I can't for the life of me figure out the attraction to this, but I mean, you think Sir Isaac Newton would be able to see through this, and yet he was involved with the whole Hermetic tradition as well. Not the Jewish version, but certainly involved with all sorts of mumbo jumbo and alchemy, and had experiments with John Locke, the two pillars of the British Enlightenment there, doing their alchemical experiments in Newton's apartment in Cambridge. So I don't understand. I've never been attracted to this kind of stuff. But I don't understand why other people are either. But, it's just part of me. I try to talk to these people in terms that make sense. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't.
I think what the attraction is that it lets you feel smarter than other people. It lets you feel like you're part of the elite.
You have some secret knowledge. I think that's the whole attraction. That's the attraction of Freemasonry.
Exactly. And even though it doesn't make sense, you feel special. You're like, I have access to this wisdom. Even though you can't explain it, the Gnosticism changes your soul. Like, you're getting possessed to a low degree. And I think that's why they want to feel special. I think that's really the core attraction.
I think that's the key attraction to Freemasonry. You're part of an elite group, and you get higher and higher up in the ranking, and you're involved in more and more secrets and in more and more elite inner circles as you rise. I think it had a huge effect on American culture. The number of people, politicians, who had to become Freemasons in order to succeed is staggering up till the present moment. If you go through Indiana, the biggest buildings in every town are basically the Masonic Lodge. Certainly true of Indianapolis, certainly true of Kokomo, pretty much true of Indiana. South Bend. So it had a powerful effect, and it became this kind of secret government within a government. But I mean, as far as I can tell, it's obsolete. It's an obsolete form of revolutionary activity, which it was certainly not in the 18th century. It was the cutting edge of revolutionary activity. It was the Goyim acting like Jews. That's what it was at that point.
Yeah, it's Kabbalah for Gentiles, essentially. It is dying down a little bit because most of the guys are old, and they've actually started. So they don't officially advertise, but I've seen on Netflix recently they're putting out documentaries that make it seem really cool and special. So they're kind of like stealth advertising to try to get people in. And there was a point, I forgot the year, there was something called the Morgan Affair in Masonry, where they lost something like 40% of all their membership in America because this guy named William Morgan, he exposed a bunch of their secrets. I think he tried to get in and wasn't allowed in and somehow got their secrets and exposed it. And the guy disappeared, and he's still never been found. Yeah, and when that became public, they lost a huge number of their members.
Yeah, the rise of the anti-Masonic parties, I think, was based on that incident.
And now they're just trying to water it down. And the fascinating thing is, like, I wrote this book called On the Masons and Their Lies that ended up as a bestseller in Amazon's religious studies philosophy category for a couple days. I was above Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion for a day, so I think God had a sense of humor about that one. And I detailed all these kind of deceptions I learned in Masonry, and then I was making a video about Jordan Peterson later on for my YouTube channel, and I heard him saying, I don't think Peterson's a Mason, but he's saying exactly the things that Masons teach. And there was a conversation between him and Russell Brand, that actor-comedian guy, where they even mentioned the secret alchemical meaning, quote-unquote, of INRI, the letters on the cross, that was literally straight out of Morals and Dogma. And I'd never heard anyone say that before.
You know, he may have gotten it through Jung. I know he talks a lot about Jung.
Yeah.
And Jung was heavily involved in the alchemical tradition and was trying to come up with some type of psychological explanation of that tradition. So he may have gotten it from him.
And it's sad because I give Peterson credit because I know that there's a lot of stories of atheists who started going back to church because he introduced them to the idea of order. But when it goes in the other direction, and I see this infection in the Orthodox Church of people who are already Orthodox, they have all these writings of the Church Fathers in the Bible, and they're being pulled away from it by Jordan Peterson, where instead of reading the Fathers, they're reading Peterson. And they even start speaking in that dualistic Jungian language about like integration of shadows and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
There's a kind of Neoplatonism that's involved there. Also, when you mention Orthodoxy, are you talking about the Eastern churches, the Russian Orthodox Church? Is that what you're talking? Are you a member of the Russian Orthodox Church?
Not Russian, but I'm a member of a canonical Orthodox church. Yes.
Okay, because I've been to Estonia, and we've had conferences with the Russian Orthodox, and I just started to notice a large element of Neoplatonism involved in it, and ideas of emanations and stuff like that were basically made obsolete by the Incarnation. And I don't understand why they perdured there, but because they have no place in Christian theology.
I mean, this perennialism stuff, this emanation stuff, I mean, it's everywhere. It's not like it's just contained in the lodges anymore. They got their stuff in every university, in movies and TV shows. I mean, Gnosticism really is the religion that I feel the bad guys are trying to spread, whereby the God of the Bible is like the small evil demiurge, but the quote-unquote good God, the real God, is this Luciferian construct that's beyond this thing. I feel like that's kind of what I've seen things kind of leading towards.
Yeah, that's clearly not Christian.
No, and it's sad when Christians start falling for it. And I was having this debate at church the other day with someone. I said, why would you read Peterson instead of the Church Fathers when the Church Fathers already said, like the good stuff that Peterson says is already said better and in better context by the Fathers? And the guy I was debating with said, well, I don't read the Church Fathers. I said, oh, so why are you even debating with me about this? You're just reading Peterson instead because he's rich and famous, you know?
Yeah. Tell me about your peers, your Jewish peers. What did they believe? Were they Jewish? Were they revolutionaries? Were they Marxists? What were they?
So most of the Jews that I grew up with and know, they believe all the Marxist things, even if they don't identify as Marxists, and even if they haven't really studied Marxist philosophy, because, in my opinion, communism in all of its forms is the practical application of the Tikkun Olam idea, and they do believe in the Tikkun Olam.
Yeah, I think David Horowitz said that explicitly in his book about what's called Notes of a Revolutionary Son, which I thought was his best book.
I haven't checked that one out yet. But I genuinely believe that the people doing this, I think that they believe they're doing the right thing. I think they're deceived instead of ontologically evil, even as hard as it is to believe that sometimes. So most of the Jews I know are very pro-gay marriage. They're pro-pornography, even if whether they use it or not themselves. I actually watched a video by that guy Al Goldstein the other day before he died. And it was like it was the revolutionary spirit on full display. He was this big pornographer and is just such a vile person. Just the words he was using, just cursing and telling everyone he's better than them. I mean, that was like the bared soul of the revolutionary spirit, I think.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that it's illegal in Israel. So like pornography is illegal in Israel, and yet they spread it on Palestinian TV channels, and most of the pornographers in America are Jewish.
Right. Because it's a weapon. It's a weapon against the Goyim.
It is, but when you bring this up to them and you say, look, this is why people don't like us. It's because of not just of this behavior, but then the hypocrisy when they confront you on it. And it's like it causes this reflexive emotional response from my Jewish friends where it's like they retreat into this shell and they can't process what's being said to them. Yeah,
that's very accurate description. Once you back them into a corner and they don't know what to say, they get very aggressive. You know, it starts off as supposed to be just a friendly conversation, and as soon as you get to something like that, it gets very aggressive. You got to break down. They have to get over this defensiveness. You know, it's basically, you know, what you mean? The Jews never did anything wrong?
In their mind, yes. And this is the thing, like when I was growing up, it's like drilled into your head that you were a victim of the white Christians, of the Gentiles. They hate you, they want to kill you, you have to always fight them and be on your defense against them.
Yeah.
At the top, there's somebody lying, whether it's the rabbi or whoever taught the rabbi. But for your average Jewish layperson, it's not like they're conscious of the dishonesty when it comes to topics like that, or they really do feel like victims, even when you try to explain to them why certain things went the way they did.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever watched A Serious Man by the Coen brothers?
Actually, I did after I watched your recommendation in one of your videos.
I think it's a great movie. I mean, they are so all over the lot. I mean, one of the worst movies I've ever seen was by the Coen brothers. But this was a really good movie. And I thought it was an honest exploration of what it meant to be, what it was like to be raised a Jew, as they were.
I mean, it's very neurotic, and the rabbis, you know, it's like the synagogue is their little kingdom, you know.
Yeah, and the rabbis are basically ruling over them, And do I kill the rabbi? And then if I kill the rabbi, I'm going to feel guilty, and I don't know what to do, and all this type of stuff. And then the tornado comes at the end.
Yeah.
I think that what we're seeing the same thing right now, like with the ADL.
Yeah.
Yesterday, the ADL issued a list of people who are going to be banned. You have to ban these people. I'm, of course, on the list.
Of course.
I'm an anti-Semite.
Of course.
Because I have the temerity to disagree with a Jew or to criticize a Jew. Okay, but it seems to me that they way overplayed their hand.
Yeah.
They had this guy Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh yeah.
Giving a speech, which I'm sure the ADL wrote for him.
Yeah.
And he's saying, the time is over now. You people in Silicon Valley, you people on Facebook, if you don't do what we say, we're going to throw you in jail.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Are you trying to persuade these people? I think you're going to cause a reaction if you start talking like that. And secondly, I think what they also confirmed is, well, I guess they're outsiders, aren't they? I mean, I thought they were inside all of these organizations running them, and it turns out they have to go on YouTube and tell YouTube what to do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's a conflict here. It's obvious that there's a conflict. Because the people who are running YouTube like to say, well, we believe in free speech. And now the official Jewish organization is saying, no, you got to do what I say. And you'll take the heat and I'll get the credit, but you still got to do what I say. Well, that's going to cause a reaction.
I don't think they can stop. What I've seen when I observe the behavior of people like that, I don't think they're capable of stopping. Because I genuinely think they're possessed. Or I don't know are you familiar with Brother Nathaniel at all?
Yeah, I am.
I mean, he's got that video where he lists out the 4 curses that Jews brought down on themselves throughout the events of the Gospels. I mean, if you look at the New Testament, where you have the Pharisees saying, where Pilate doesn't really want to go through with it, and you have the Pharisees saying, well, let his blood be on us and our children, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a very serious thing to say.
That's serious.
And I think that the blood is on them and their children. It was on me, I know that. I mean, I had the same reactionary spirit, not because I was consciously trying to, do anything bad to the goyim. It's just that's part of your soul until Christ heals you from it.
If you don't believe in Logos, if you're in rebellion against Logos, you don't understand limits. And if you don't understand limits, you just push things. It's called chutzpah. It's a Jewish virtue that you're just pushing the thing and getting as much as you can and keep pushing. Well, when you're in that mode, the thing that stops you is something outside of you. Not you yourself. Some greater force comes along and suddenly, wait a minute, we're in trouble now. We went too far. Now there's a pogrom. Now there's this. Now there's that, Well, that's the problem.
Well, all the prophets dealt with the same thing. They were saying to the Jews, look, if you turn your back on God, he's going to punish you. And they would attack the prophet or kill him or ignore him, and then they'd get punished. And it's like the same phenomenon I see happening throughout the modern world too. Yeah.
I have a Jewish friend who actually is a big promoter of that Civiltà Cattolica series on the Jewish question. He actually paid to have it translated, and he thinks it's the greatest statement of the Jewish question. He firmly believes what Civiltà Cattolica had to say, and he was especially impressed by that passage where the higher you rise, the farther you're going to fall. And they are digging a pit and they're going to fall in this pit, And he's telling me that what happened in Germany during World War II or the 1930s is going to look like a picnic compared to what he feels is coming down the pike, because they are just piling, the Jews are just piling one crime upon another. I mean, it came to me in a graphic way when I was in Mashhad. It was about 2 years ago. And at this point, the Palestinians are walking toward the wall, these walls that they built, and they're snipers and they're shooting these people down. And I'm watching it on television. And you expect there's going to be no reaction? You expect people not to be upset? You expect me to believe that when the sniper shoots a woman in the back, that it's self-defense, that I'm going to believe that? No, it's not working. That's the type of, that instills this fear. You get this fear in people because they know they're doing something wrong.
I see where it's heading as well. I mean, at this point, and I keep trying to tell this, like, I want to help my Jewish brethren. I want to bring them to church and get them to stop doing this stuff. It's like, this reaction that's going to be caused is inevitable. I mean, look at what happened to the Jewish people throughout history, even before there was an internet, even before countries could share what was going on in their own countries. And now it's global. That's why they're trying to crack down on the internet, obviously. But the more they try to censor, the more angry people get, because it's not like censoring people from talking about something makes them stop believing it. Now they believe it more and they're angry. It's like, guys, just stop, just stop hurting people, and they're not going to get mad at you. It's really what's very obvious now. Like, it's so hard to get through to them. So I'm going to have to check out this Dagger of Faith. I'll see if I can get my hands on it.
Yeah. Well, I was in the discussion, and suddenly the Poway shootings take place, and then they're blaming me. I said, every single video I've done, I said the first principle of the Catholic Church in dealing with Jews is no one has the right to harm the Jew. Sicut Judaeus non. I've said that so many times I can't count it. And yet, as soon as something like this happens, they say, oh, you're responsible. No, I'm not responsible. I turned it around and I told the ADL, you're responsible, because this guy felt hopeless. He felt that no one was listening. And when no one listens, when you can't talk, I guess you pick up a gun, right? And that's what he did. He even said it in that manifesto that he wrote. The time for action is over, or time for talk is over. So then what happens 2 days later? Ambassador Dannon comes to the United States and he says exactly the same thing as the shooter did. The time for talk is over. We want to criminalize anti-Semitism. Well, what is it? You can't even define it. It's anything that Jews don't like. That's anti-Semitism. And now I'm supposed to go to jail because of that? Or I'm not supposed to feel resentment because of the way you're talking? I'm not supposed to feel threatened by this? You got to get in contact with reality, Ambassador. You're not in contact with reality. All you do is talk to other Jews. You just talk to other Jews, other fanatical Jews, and so you're not in contact with reality.
Yeah, you were on my friend Michael Sisko's podcast recently, and I was on that podcast too, talking with him about that incident, because Poway is pretty close to where I live. I've been to there's an Orthodox church across the street from that, Chabad actually. It's a Russian Orthodox church. I think it's Saint John of Damascus or something. And we were talking about the exact same thing, where when you take away people's ability to air their grievances, like verbally, like it's not that the grievances don't go away. They're going to find another way to express it, and it's not going to be a way that you like. So the solution is to stop grieving people, to stop harming people. I think that makes sense. But
I mean, logos is the essence of what we are. That is the essence of what we are. And the first manifestation of logos is speech. And so if you prohibit speech, you're prohibiting something essential to a human being. And he's going to obviously react in a violent way.
I've experienced, I would say I've experienced, quote unquote, maybe no quotes necessary, anti-Semitism in the true sense maybe once in my entire life. I'm 32 years old. I'm not talking about people criticizing Jewish behavior or things they don't like going on in Israel. I mean like someone finding out I was Jewish and getting up from the table and walking away and not talking to me again for the whole rest of the seminar that I was at. That was like one incident. I would say this is not a very common thing. And it's so overblown because like the hatred of the person for their race is so different from the criticism of a behavior that's directly harming you. And I think the linguistic trick, or the wizardry as some people might say, is to conflate these two and just make people walk on eggshells because they're so scared of being labeled with this word that they don't even know what it is. They're just going to sit there quietly stewing in their anger until they explode. And I think that's if you really want to stop people from being upset at Jews, it's literally the exact polar opposite of what you should be doing, which is, first of all, at least showing some degree of empathy with why people are upset. Just having the humility and the insight to say, look, we understand that you had this culture and that the people who harmed this culture were members of my group. I understand what you're upset about. Even that small act, I think, would go such a long way. And then the next thing is to stop doing it, of course. Yeah. And if it doesn't happen, things are just going to get worse. There's no way around it.
Yeah, I'm getting a sense that the Jews themselves are getting upset with the ADL. They're first of all, there is a split. The commentary crowd does not like Mr. Greenblatt at all. okay, because he's a liberal Jew associated with Obama. But I'm talking about the broad, the whole group there. You know, are they awakening to the fact that this guy is making your whole group look repulsive
That's the problem.
and arrogant?
The people they trot out as like the representatives of Judaism are the most repulsive people they can find. Like you just look at Greenblatt's the tone, the skin color, like just the pale gray yellowness of it, the dead vacuous eyes. It's like this is not someone that represents our group. This is not someone repeating ideas that at least I personally believe in. And I have a bunch of Jewish converts to Orthodoxy that are my friends. None of us like this guy or any of the stuff that the ADL is doing.
No.
And then the ADL, of course, is part of Bene Brith, which is like exclusively Jewish version of Freemasonry, essentially.
Right.
And Bill Cooper talked about this a lot. No one even talks about this stuff. And now you have this Kufi group, this Christians United for Israel, like the biggest Zionist lobby in the country are Protestants. And if you look at their website, everyone singing their praises is a member of Bene Brith. This is a Gentile front of Bene Brith. I'm absolutely convinced of it. This mega church down in Texas. You know, you have Netanyahu giving all these testimonials for it. And no one talks about Bene Brith except Bill Cooper, and they killed him. People don't mention them anymore. But they're a huge influence.
Yeah.
The Sons of the Covenant is what Bene Brith is, this Jewish secret society.
Yeah, one of their goals was to promote Sigmund Freud. He was a member of Bene Brith.
That does not surprise me. I got my degree in psychology, and I don't know why people like Freud and Jung are exalted to the prominence they are, except as a deliberate way of subverting people. Because Freud himself admitted the purpose of his method was to make the therapist rich. You don't learn this in the class, though. You learn that he's this genius, right? Not this coked-out psycho who wanted to sleep with his mother and base his whole method based on that.
Yeah. Well, I think his star is waned, though. I mean, 40 years ago in graduate school, you had to have a Freudian on the English department to give you the take on that. And I think those days are past. I think he just wore out because there was too much information came out. He couldn't control. I mean, obviously he was dead, but the Freudians could not control the flow of information. And so when like the story of Horace Frink came out, the American psychiatrist who went to Freud to become certified, and Freud told him to, he had to get on the couch with Sigmund Freud. And at that point, he told Freud that he was having an affair with one of his patients, which violates every professional code. But instead of reprimanding him, Freud told him to dump his wife, marry the rich patient, and then make a big contribution to the Psychoanalytic Society.
Wow.
It's hard when you have faced with facts like that, the reputation just crumbles, and you begin to realize what you said was true. It was the big competition was between Freud and Jung was who was going to get the richest Americans to fund them. And I think Jung won that hands down because Edith Rockefeller McCormick showed up, and her brother Madel gave Jung a lot of money.
Well, it seems like a lot of people. I'm noticing this phenomenon. Like I've been speaking with Roosh a lot. I post on his forum. I hung out with him on his tour. It seems like the worse things get in the culture, the more people start turning away from things like psychology, and they go, "This isn't working. We're all on drugs, whether they're prescribed by a doctor or not." So it's like the worse things get, the more people are turning to God and saying, "Look, nothing that the world is offering me is healing me at all, and I need something beyond what's being told to me and taught to me."
I think that's the way God moves in human history. That God takes evil and turns it into good. I mean, the story of Joseph in the Bible in Genesis is the classic example. You know, the brothers did him evil, but if it weren't for the fact that he was in Egypt, they all would have starved to death. I came to this conclusion when I finished the Logos book. This is the way God moves in human history. Hegel had an understanding of it. He screwed up, but he did have a clear sense. He studied theology at a Lutheran seminary, and he had a clear sense of divine providence, and that came out in his philosophy of history. It wasn't a book that he wrote himself. His students compiled notes from his courses and came out with that book, but it was basically an attempt to reconcile the Enlightenment with the classical understanding of divine providence. And I think that was a worthwhile endeavor. And I think he was more successful in his philosophy of history than he was with the dialectic, which was basically his attempt to come up with an understanding of the Trinity, an updated version suitable for Enlightenment thinkers of the Trinity. He screwed that up royally, but that's in the book. We can talk about that when the book comes out.
As a final note here, I wanted to go longer, but the sun is fading behind me, and my screen's going to be black kind of soon. When is your book going to be coming out?
We're shooting for January. We talked to the printer. It looks as if the paper's going to come in December, and we should have copies by the middle of January.
And what length of book? Are we talking like the Revolutionary Spirit?
No, we're talking about a mere 800 pages.
A mere 800 pages.
It's called Logos Rising, a history of ultimate reality. I'm thinking of calling it a short history of ultimate reality because it's only 800 pages long.
Well, that sounds phenomenal, and I'm absolutely going to buy that when it comes out. And Dr. Jones, I want to say thank you so much for coming on here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you, and likewise yourself. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And if you ever want to chat again, I will always make myself available. I really, really enjoyed this, and I hope that you did as well.
I did. Good luck. Shalom.
All right, have a good night.